The need to matter is a survival instinct. So think about how desperate you are when you haven't slept or you haven't eaten. The same is true when we don't feel that we matter. We become desperate and we will latch on to anything that gives us a sense of our significance. And that's part of why I think we see the division we see today. I think people across the political spectrum feel unseen, across both sides, everywhere, and insignificant. And so they're latching on to the people that help them feel significant. And that's why we're creating division.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, the home of Googleization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy, never normal shift going on all around us. Our goal is to bring you ways to reimagine tomorrow and explore the ever-changing convergence of people, business, and technology. Here is your host, Ira Wolfe.
Welcome back to Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization, the podcast where I don't sugarcoat the future. I take it apart and help you reassemble it, reinvent it, so it works for you. Today's episode cuts straight to the heart and maybe the soul of what's breaking our workplaces and our communities. Spoiler alert, it's not about hybrid work or AI or DEI or Gen Z's attention span. It's something way more human. Today, we're going to tackle a subject that I find fascinating, alarming, and hopeful. It's something my guest, Dr. Zach Mercurio, calls the epidemic of insignificance. The name might be familiar because Zach's been a frequent flyer on Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization, for which I am grateful. He's the author of the long-awaited book, The Power of Mattering, a compelling manifesto for leaders who are brave enough to confront the truth. Most people don't quit their jobs because of paychecks. They quit because they feel invisible. If you're a leader still mistaking employee engagement for another survey score, buckle up. Zach's about to flip the script. This isn't about soft skills. This is about hardcore survival. So let's give a big, warm Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization welcome to Zach Mercurio. Welcome back to Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. Appreciate you being back here. As we talked a little bit before the show, I think you're ready for almost ready for the red jacket. I think 5 visits. So one more, we'll have to get you back. Hopefully that'll be soon. But congratulations, great book, The Power of Mattering. I know we've talked about it in great deal the last few times you were on the show. Loved the book, digesting it, took far too many notes and questions, but how timely could this be? I mean, you guys, I joked when my second edition of Recruiting in the Age of Googleization came out in February 2020, and then the pandemic hit. So I talked about disruption and VUCA and how the world of recruiting and work was going to change. And now here we are, 2025, your book's coming out of Mattering. And as I was reading the book, a couple things. When we think about mattering, if we go back to the election, I don't want to turn this into politics, but we talk about how the election, how voters voted, why they voted that way. And again, it was a whole segment of the population didn't feel like they mattered. We talk about AI every day, threatening to take jobs. And again, it's like I thought I was safe, and that now we have some policy changes and people who thought they had a lifetime of career and it was safe, all of a sudden don't feel like they matter. Return to work mandates. It's like every place you turn, nobody's talking about mattering but you, and hopefully we'll get a lot of people talking about it, or nobody's thinking about it. But it's really all about mattering. So whether you're a politician, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a parent, whether you're a boss, it fits. So let's rip the Band-Aid off. Why are people so bad at feeling of helping people feel like they matter?
Gosh, you just threw a lot at me.
Yeah, I did. Oh, you know I do that. You've been.
Yeah. Why are people so bad at making people feel that they matter? Well, most of the time, people have been rewarded to do otherwise. We are rewarded to acquire and achieve for ourselves from grade school. And we are in systems that reward us to move fast, to produce quickly, and to perform at all costs. And it's very hard to rely on someone to be morally good in a system that incentivizes them not to be. And so I think we're in systems that incentivize us not to be. Now, what that requires of us is to actually make the choice to consciously do this for other people, the choice to care. I would say that in my research on leaders who do this, the commonality is that in every interaction, whether they're in an economic downturn, a tight labor market, whether they're working with an underperformer, whether they're cleaning an airport or coaching a high school soccer team, the leaders who do this make the choice in every interaction to care. They make the choice and they develop the skills to care. And this is another reason why we're so bad at it. We've been rewarded to do otherwise, but we also have called these skills soft. So in the late 1960s, there was an army psychologist, I can't remember his name, but he was studying what contributed to high performing army teams. And he realized there was a set of actions and skills that he couldn't categorize in technical or operational ability. And so he called those skills soft. And this is a big problem because when your brain sees something as soft or simple, it devotes less energy to it. It's called an overconfidence bias. So I also think another reason why we're so bad at it is because we think we're better at it than we are. When we see something as simple, when we see something as soft, we approach it with less rigor. That's why less than 2% of the world's population, for example, gets any formal education on how to listen well. And then I'm going to add the third reason why we're bad at this, and that's because of these things. I'm holding up a phone. For the past 25 years, we have been able to communicate with one another via short one-way transactions of information. And our phones and platforms have allowed us to evade the social situations in which we learn and hone the skills to care. So if you send me some good news, I can just give you a thumbs up emoji. I don't have to sit with you and say, hey, I'm really proud of you. I really see your effort here. If you give me some bad news, I can just say, hey, sorry to hear that. And I've done my civic duty on a text message. I don't have to sit with you and show compassion, understanding. And what we have to understand is the less we use a skill, the less proficient we get at it. And here we are in a time where we need it most.
So so you did to me what I did to you. So you so many roads.
Just to recap, those are the three reasons. One, we're rewarded not to do it. And being aware of that is a huge first step, because that makes you have to be courageous. Like you have to be courageous in the face of these systems to care. The second is, again, that we've called these things soft for a half century. And so we've approached them with less rigor. We don't tend to learn these skills anywhere. And then three is that, technology simply made it easier for us not to use them.
So a couple things there. One is, and we can certainly go down this road of belonging, and this goes back to the return to the office mandates that are coming out, and also a lot of discussion about people being disconnected and feeling lonely because they were working remotely, and a big distinction. And I know we talked about this in the past between belonging, feeling lonely, and mattering. Okay. So let's deal with that right now, because again, if we just take it, and I don't want to say this is simple, but because the movement has been so dramatic to go back to a return to the office, because people felt disconnected. And obviously, and I say this facetiously, obviously, if you're working at home, you must be lonely. Okay, that disconnect. Yeah. And I say that facetiously because I think it's, as you have indicated, huge misunderstanding.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a room full of people and not felt like anybody knew you? And what does that feel
sometimes
like?
It's family.
You want to leave the room.
Sometimes
right?
you can feel like even within family. Yeah.
You want to leave the room. The quantity of interactions does not matter much when it comes to feelings of belonging and feelings of not being lonely. It's the quality of the interactions is what matters. And this is also why it's very important to distinguish between belonging, mattering, and even inclusion. I'll add that one to this because I know
Oh,
that's
well, that
all
was
over the
part of
place
mine.
right
Yeah.
now, right? So
Yeah, and I
belonging,
just want to say something there because we talked about, especially with the I won't say anti DEI, but everything that's going on with DEI. We've talked about it for years. I mean, it was about diversity, making sure each minority, each person was represented. But inclusion wasn't just making sure that they were included in the numbers, or that they were mentioned, but I never ever remember in all the discussions in my last 30 years in HR that anybody talked about inclusion equals mattering.
yes, I know. And so what's happening is that, belonging is feeling welcomed and accepted and connected to a group. Inclusion is feeling that you can take an equal active role in that group. But mattering is feeling significant to individuals in that group. So you can do a belonging intervention, you can do an inclusion intervention, you can have the best DEI program out there, but people can still feel insignificant to the people around them because those people don't have the skills to help them feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. And I think this is where DEI failed. I think DEI failed because it was theoretical in large concepts. We want people to belong, we want them to be connected, we think everybody should feel included. But what we didn't do is we didn't equip people with the everyday skills to make sure people feel significant to them. Everyone feels significant to the people around them. And I think that's where you saw a lot of dissonance between the theory of DEI and the actual feeling of feeling that you matter. And when people don't feel that they matter, they either withdraw, so they isolate, they opt out of these important conversations, they leave, or they act out in desperation. They protest, they complain, they blame, they gossip. And so I think a large reason why these theoretical programs haven't worked is because they actually weren't delivering on the daily experience of mattering to the people they were meant to serve and the people that they weren't meant to serve, the people all around them that needed to deliver this to people who were underserved.
Did DEI actually have the opposite effect? Because the groups of people, um, did it disenfranchise a group of people? I guess is what I'm saying. Is that yes, it did impact other people, underrepresented minorities got recognized. So we hit the diversity numbers. There was that some sense of belonging, the inclusion. We'll throw out the equity part. that was completely separate. Um, but did it then disenfranchise another group of people?
Yeah, I think that I mean, I think that the actual purpose of DEI originally is a noble purpose, right? It's to make sure that people who are
Hmm?
traditionally underserved and underrepresented are represented and feel that they can have a seat at the table because of their unique perspectives, their unique talents, their unique abilities. I mean, I think that's the original purpose. And I don't think
Right,
anybody really argues that that's bad.
right,
I think the problem is it became imposed and it became programmatic and not interactional. So we had programs, but there wasn't the practical application of making this come alive for everyone on a team on a daily basis. And that's ultimately why, if people don't experience significance on a daily basis, it doesn't matter how represented they are or included they are or how much they feel a sense of belonging. If you feel a sense of insignificance, you will withdraw or act out in desperation. So I really think it's the missing link. And I'm going to bring this back to something you said earlier about a whole group of people being disenfranchised with the election. And, when people feel that they don't matter, when they're unseen in their workplace, when they're unheard in their communities, when they feel that they're overlooked, they will latch on to anything to give them a sense of significance. We've talked about this in previous episodes. The need to matter is a survival instinct. So think about how desperate you are when you haven't slept or you haven't eaten. The same is true when we don't feel that we matter. We become desperate and we will latch on to anything that gives us a sense of our significance. And that's part of why I think we see the division we see today. I think people across the political spectrum feel unseen, across both sides, everywhere, and insignificant. And so they're latching on to the people that help them feel significant. And that's why we're creating division.
Yeah, I just want to get the cover of the book, which is coming out May.
May 13th.
May 13th. It'll be available. So everyone who's up there, I just want to make sure that we've got that up there, and you can get that on Amazon or anywhere you purchase books, or from Zach's website. You certainly can go there, and we'll make sure that there's a link in there for that. Zach, something that you mentioned earlier, and let's go back to some of the basics of mattering. And this hit me, and even knowing where this was going, but when I saw it in print, that mattering is actually two components. It's not only feeling that you matter, but it's adding value to others. It's helping others feel like that you're adding value to a larger entity. And again, we talk about that as feeling purpose and having meaningful work, a whole lot of things. Expand upon that a little bit, that it's really two sides of the coin, that it's critical. It's just not a one way approach.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up. Isaac Prilatensky, who's a psychologist, theorized mattering as both feeling valued and knowing how we add value. And it's important to know how those connect with one another, because when we feel valued by people, we develop two beliefs that are necessary to add value: the belief that I'm worthy, and the belief that I'm capable. So self-esteem and self-efficacy. What happens is then we get the confidence we need to know that we can add value. And when we add value, we're actually making a difference to the community around us, to the people around us, and we know how we're relied on and needed by others. But I think it's very important, and Isaac Prilatensky, who developed this theory, is very clear on this, that we need to feel valued to add value. So we need to feel that we have a sense of worth to other people, and that we have what it takes. We're capable. The most important predictor of knowing our self-esteem, our worth, and our capability is called verbal reinforcement. So from others in our environment, to know that we add value. So a lot of leaders think that we should be valued once we add value. Like once people perform and produce, we should give them a raise. We should give them promotions. We should give them all these awards. But people actually have to be valued to add value. But then once they do, and once people see how they add value, they get evidence in their environment that helps them feel valued. And that's what I call the virtuous cycle of mattering. It's an upward spiral in an organization. And the result of both feeling valued and adding value are things like increased motivation, because it's very hard for anything to matter to someone who doesn't believe that they matter. Increased resilience. It's very hard to carry on without a will to carry on. For example, resilience. When researchers study people in survival situations, there's one quality that seems to separate them, and it's not physical and it's not toughness. It's, do they have something to get home to? Do they matter to someone else enough, and do they bring that person to mind? Really, there's a great book called Deep Survival. It's an in-depth study on survival scenarios and why people survive in difficult traumatic situations and why people don't. The number one predictor is knowing that you matter to someone that you have to get back to. So resilience, well-being, and then the result of all of those things, of motivation, resilience, and well-being, is performance. The problem is that leaders tend to pursue performance without making sure people feel valued, so they can add value, so they're resilient, so they're motivated, and so they're well, which are the predictors of performance.
Yeah, which leads us up to what you've called the epidemic of insignificance.
Absolutely.
That's been created. And again, going back to if you, we'll be studying this past election for forever, but a whole party, there was a whole group of people, at least 80 million people who voted one way because they felt one party at least recognized them, gave them some significance, gave them some hope. And another part felt that they were deserted, that we don't matter anymore to you. So again, they're going to study that, forever. But it was long. I mean, this is long coming, and it's just not in politics. Disengagement in the workplace. We have all the quotes. I think you quoted that we've had an epidemic of 85% disengagement for the last 40 years.
Yep. And this is despite and the employee
billions of dollars.
Yeah, the employment engagement industry is a $1 billion industry. And there are how many well-being programs, DEI initiatives, perks. We've gone through perks culture.
Yeah.
We've wages have, everybody talks about wages and inflation. Wages over the past 8 years have increased on average 39%. That's one of the highest rates in history. Right. Wage increases. Nothing's moved the needle. In fact, Gallup in January reported that engagement is at its lowest point in a decade.
Yeah, and how often we heard that? I mean, it hits a new low, and then it hits a new low.
And the two drivers, though, there were two key drivers that were the worst they've been in history, which I think this is what we're talking about. And the two key drivers in that data was just 39% of people said they had someone at work that cared about them as a person.
Right.
There's 30% of people in that sample said that they had someone at work who invested in their unique potential. That goes back to the data we've already covered on this show. 30% of people feel invisible at work. 65% of people, according to the American Psychological Association, every time they do this survey, feel perpetually underappreciated and undervalued in work. So, I mean, this is not a disengagement crisis. This is an interactional problem. This cannot be solved in programs. It can't be solved in initiatives. It can't be solved with more surveys. It can only be solved by people showing up for other people.
There's two parts of that. One is, if you can expand upon that doesn't mean that you have to do it in person.
Right.
That it's not a return to office. But before we get there, you started the first chapter of your book. You tell a story. I mean, how you got into this, which is great. But it also becomes a generational thing, because I'll go back to, and again, being of maybe at least 2 generations ahead of you.
I don't know. I don't even know what generation. I don't even really subscribe to generation.
But chronologically, so forget the generations, but just a couple decades. For years, I mean, every management consultant wrote about how there was a janitor. You talked about the custodian. So, in an airport, and this was attributed to JFK. In the 60s, going through a NASA facility, and he asked the janitor what he was doing, and the janitor replied, "Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon." When he was expecting, it's like, oh, I'm cleaning the floors, I'm sweeping up, I take out the trash, tasks that they did. So he felt that he had a bigger purpose. You shared your story, which, or I'll allow you to share your story of how you started on the mattering journey. What prompted you with, your experience, and maybe that'll be the new generational story. So generations to come, they'll be talking about you with the custodian that touched your heart.
I'd love to back up on the NASA janitor story for a bit, because I shared that in my first book. But as I was writing my first book, after I finished it, there's a guy named Andrew Carton. He's at the Wharton School, and he did an archival study of NASA during that time. And if you want to talk about a practical management challenge, NASA had over 300,000 contract workers across the United States working on this project that no one knew if it was possible or not. Right. Talk about a challenge.
Oh, I remember that. We were still looking at green cheese on the moon. And
right. Yeah. Like how are we going to do this? And you had people in facilities, you had truck drivers transporting goods, janitors, astronauts, physicists, chemists, all these people. How do you get them to feel needed? How do you get them to feel that they matter in this?
There's a whole movie about that.
Most of them won't even be here, right? If this mission is complete, won't even be contracted. And that one of the things I think is important to remember is that Andrew Carton did this study, and he looked at meeting agendas and he looked at photographs of NASA offices. And the one practice he consistently found was that all supervisors showed people what was called a ladder to the moon. They had it written on blackboards, where at the top of the ladder, they had to put a person on the moon by the end of the decade. And at the bottom of the ladder, they had their groups' monthly tasks. And they showed them, here's how your task is necessary for this objective. Here's how this objective is necessary for this higher objective, another rung up the ladder. And then here's how this objective is needed to put a person on the moon by the end of the decade. So that makes the JFK janitor story a little bit different. This wasn't just a janitor who showed up and all of a sudden
Right.
believed he was putting a
Oh,
person on the
absolutely.
moon. This was because leaders showed them how they mattered. They didn't just say that they mattered. Good leaders tell people that they matter. The best leaders show them exactly how they mattered. They showed them exactly how they were needed. And feeling needed is an essential component to feeling that we matter. And the way that I got started in this is I did a study with university custodians because I noticed that they were in a job that was really invisible and really overlooked. Very difficult work. And I thought to myself, gosh, I wonder how people in this type of occupation experiences meaningfulness in their work. And there was this one woman, Jane, who shared with me that when she got this job, she was near homelessness. She wished that she could have been anywhere else. A lot of her friends said, why couldn't you done something more with your life? She applied to 14 places, got rejected from all of them. She said she just clocked in, clocked out. That was it. Was miserable. And one supervisor noticed that she was struggling, brought her into a break room, gave her a dictionary, had her read the dictionary definition of custodian, which is a person responsible for a building and everyone in it. And she said that when he read that aloud to her, it was the first time in her life anybody showed her she was worthy. And that moment charted her on an 18-year career at the university, that moment of being seen. But here's the power of that. And I'll relate it back to the JFK janitor story. She saw the indisputable evidence of her significance. That leader putting that dictionary in front of her. Those leaders at NASA putting the ladder to the moon out on the blackboard. And that's what great leaders do. They show people the indisputable evidence of their significance. No matter how Jane got there, it was inarguable that she was adding value, that she was needed, and that her supervisor noticed her struggling.
Right. And I think the one thing that sort of got overblown, because then that quote, by the way, of about the janitor and feeling a bigger purpose and a mission, then got attributed to Tom Peters. So if we go through like the 60s and then the 80s and now we're 4 decades out, everybody used the same story, but then it was all about building culture. It was just about building the right culture, and then that was the engagement, but never got to the significance of significance.
Yeah, they everybody likes that story because it's inspiring, but what they look over is that deliberate work NASA managers actually did to make that belief come to life. I mean, they were writing ladders to the moon on their blackboard. They had a stepping stones approach. In fact, they would have calls where colleagues had to talk to each other and share the stepping stones of someone else's job to their job. So if they didn't know how someone else's job was necessary for their job, NASA managers made them have these dyad conversations with each other to find out how this person's work was necessary for your person's work, because they realized the stakes were too high for people to feel replaceable or dispensable. Because when people feel replaceable, they act replaceable. And the stakes were too high in that scenario to do that. And so, yeah, it's a nice feel-good story, but you got to go deeper. This is a deliberate management practice that takes skill that has to be learned and honed. It doesn't just happen because you tell people that you have a big purpose. It doesn't just happen because you tell people you're saving the world. It happens because they measurably experience how they're needed every day. Every day.
Right. And we're at that crossroads again, not only with the politics that's going on in the country and the economy and everything else, but with AI. I mean, people are feeling indispensable, that they don't matter. It's that I'm going to be replaced by a piece of technology or a piece of software. And yet, when you look at the other studies that are done, it's not dystopian. It's that there's just new opportunities, many new opportunities that exist for people to do that. But if they don't feel like they matter, then there's no hope. We're going to pass the blame. There's going to be resistance. Where I talk about adaptability in AQ, and a part of that is going beyond just grit and resilience, but growth mindset. How do we make these changes? How do you create the environment? Because it's not isolated. You can have people that have all the abilities in the world, but you need a supportive environment. Right. How do you create that? But I think the theme that runs across there, it's just not doing tasks. It's not just, you can't paint the walls and have pizza parties. And sometimes it's simple and it doesn't cost a lot. It is those micro interactions. So before we go too far, we started it. We've kind of gone. Hopefully we've persuaded people that there's a solution to all this, and how do we create this culture of mattering or power, and how do we leverage the power of mattering? You have a pretty simple acronym. I don't know if it's an acronym, but kind of a 3-steps approach, the 3 ingredients.
For Australians, it's an acronym because Nan means grandmother.
Yeah. Okay.
Some of my Australian
that makes
clients
sense.
are like, that makes it easy to remember.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll remember it then. Now it's an association, right? Let's talk about those. Let's leave people, our listeners, with some tidbits of what are the 3 steps, or what are the 3 ingredients they need to make a fruitful change, productive change.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad you are bringing that up. And I want you to think about these as practice areas. And for each of these practice areas, there are skills. And this didn't just come from me sitting in my office thinking about what it means to matter. This came from researching thousands of people, and questions like, when you feel that you matter to your leader, what are they doing? By the way, if there's anything you take away from this conversation, this is the most powerful one, in my opinion. If you want to improve any relationship at work or anywhere in life, start asking this question. When I help you feel that you matter, what am I doing? When I help you feel significant, what am I doing? That'll give you the best data you need. But when we've asked people what their leaders do when they feel significant, they've said some version of these 3 practice areas. One is their leader helps them feel seen and heard. We call it noticing. Why do we call it noticing? Because there's a difference between knowing somebody and noticing them. You can know your best friend, but not notice that they're struggling. That supervisor that Jane, the custodian, had noticed that she was struggling and took an action to show her that he noticed her, that he saw her. Noticing is a deliberate practice. It is the practice of seeing another person. It is the practice of hearing another person, making sure you're getting at the meaning behind their words. So feeling seen and heard, that's noticing. The second is affirming. Different than just appreciation or recognition. We have appreciation and recognition programs, but appreciation is just showing general gratitude for who someone is. Recognition is showing general gratitude for what someone does, but affirmation is showing somebody how their specific unique gifts make a specific unique impact. One easy practice is to just say a better thank you instead of good job, thank you. Tell someone exactly how they made a difference and tell them the story of the difference they made. Name their gifts. Everybody brings us 4 gifts. They bring us their strengths, what they love and what they're good at. They bring us their purpose, their impact on us. They bring us their perspective, how only they see the world, and they bring us their wisdom. What's something that only they can teach us? So affirming people, giving them that evidence of their significance. And again, that's what Jane's supervisor did. He showed her the dictionary. That's what NASA did. They showed them the ladder. It was indisputable. And then finally, people have to feel needed. People have to feel that they are relied on, that they are indispensable. One of the best ways to do this is use 5 words. If it wasn't for you. Think of someone you rely on right now in your life or in your work. And now think about the last time you explicitly told them. Most of the time, if you do that, you'll find that there's a gap between your feelings of gratefulness and your actions of gratitude. So say to them, if it wasn't for you. And if you do that and show them why they matter to you, you will see the power of mattering. There are few feelings more powerful than knowing that our presence and our absence means something to just one other person. And that's the power. That's the power of mattering.
2 final questions. One is, And this is the pushback question.
Sure.
So there are people talking about there are some people, I guess the danger is, and maybe this is the perception, if you help if you do all these interactions and you build up people, is how do you deal with the person who's needy, who
Yeah.
always needs to feel like they matter, who
Yeah.
sort of sucks the oxygen out of the room and sort of spoils it for everybody else.
Well, I mean, I think you have to be realistic about this stuff. Like, if somebody already does feel needed and already does feel affirmed, then you may not need to devote much
Right.
energy in those areas. But that same person might need to feel seen and heard. They might need to feel noticed. One of the things that I encourage leaders to do is to look at their teams. What are you doing to help people feel seen and heard? What are you helping to do to help people feel affirmed and help people feel needed? If someone already feels needed and you know that and it's very clear,
Right.
they may need to feel seen and heard. Now, the other thing is you have to understand that most people who seek validation and who act out in ways like the person you're describing usually are the products of the perpetual unmet need to matter in
Right.
other areas of their life. People always say to me, Zach, well, what if this person's a narcissist? First of all, the likelihood that you work with a narcissist is about 1 in 100. Less than 1% of the world is a clinical narcissist. People have been throwing that around lately just to make
Yeah.
excuses that people are hopeless. You likely don't work with a narcissist. You likely work with someone who doesn't feel that they and their expertise and their institutional knowledge are seen, heard, and valued anymore. And so they're acting out to get the attention they don't think they're getting from you. That's the sad,
Opportunity.
that's the
Yeah.
hard truth, is that most behavioral issues are the products of environment, and you're part of the environment. So the first thing I would also ask is, how am I complicit in creating the behaviors I say I don't want in this person? Um,
So
and so
opportunity there, yeah, and again,
opportunity there.
opportunity.
Absolutely.
If you hired them, or if they're in place, or even if they're part of your family, that they have a value, they have strengths. There's a reason
There's
that
a
they're
yes.
here. Yeah,
This
is
is why we
how do you help them leverage that?
this is why I encourage leaders to drop the labels. If you want to immediately become a better leader, stop labeling people. Right? High performers, low performers, difficult people, toxic people, disengaged employees,
Yep.
engaged employees, introverts, extroverts. The moment you label a person is the moment you stop seeking to understand them, because your brain categorizes that person and your brain decides to devote less energy
Right.
to it. We become less curious. Instead, I encourage people to say, this is a human being who's a mother, father, spouse, beloved parent, beloved dad, mom, friend, who's behaving in ways that I perceive as difficult.
One last question, because I know you've got to run shortly. What is something that I didn't ask you that you'd want listeners to know?
That's a good question. I think something that people have been asking me in other ways than directly asking me is like, is this just a nice idea? Is this really how the world works? Isn't the world a hard place? Aren't the best people in the world, when you look at people like Elon Musk or Henry Ford, aren't the best leaders in the world that have really innovated everything pretty cruel and relentless in
Right.
pursuing what they're pursuing? Like when you
Hmm.
look at those case studies, the reason why we know those people's names is because they're outliers. It's important to people to recognize that. People like these big business titans that everybody is praising and fawning over right now, especially in certain circles, are successful not because of how they treat people, but in spite of it, how they
Right.
treat people. And I think that that's important to understand, that really when you think about the best leaders at the team level, I'm not talking about CEOs, I'm not talking about product innovators, I'm not talking about inventors or capital managers. I'm talking about the people who lead the people in these organizations. The best people, the best leaders are the ones who show up, support people, care for people, show people how they're connected to a bigger vision, and make the choice to care. And we see it in studies of athletic coaches who are high performing.
Mhm.
We see it in studies of team leaders. We can also do an informal study right now. Everybody listening, think about the leader in your life who you most admire and you'd most want to follow, and ask why. Is anybody thinking about the quarterly earnings report they just produced? Is anybody thinking about their great product launch? No, you're thinking of someone who is there for you, challenged you, supported you, connected with you, knew your kids' names, showed up for you when you needed it, took a chance on you. So I think we have to be very careful about the leadership lessons we're learning in an era where poor leadership, poor people leadership is on display.
What a perfect way to end this conversation, which I hate to end. Can talk to you all day long, and hopefully we'll have that opportunity to do it again. But a perfectly hopeful,
Yeah.
optimistic kind of message. And again, I'm with you 100%,
Yeah.
and that's why I continue. Everybody says, "Why don't you aren't oh, when are you going to retire?" And it's like I still have work to do. There's still
Especially right
opportunities to
now.
make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Let me throw your book cover up here one more time, coming out May 13th, The Power of Mattering. Zach, how can people get in touch with you other than going to Amazon? What other opportunities do you have for people?
Yeah, go to zachmercurio.com. There's two areas. There's a Mattering Center actually we've created that has you can just freely download an assessment, some exercises, some ways to say thank you better to other people. We also have a purpose area because a lot of my former research was on purpose. You can sort of
Mhm.
read how those two come together. There's a purpose statement template. There's all sorts of stuff there that you can just use.
Nice.
Powerofmattering.com if you want to learn about the new book. If you get it, let me know what you think. And I'd love to stay connected there.
Perfect. And I'll put all the links up in the notes as well. And
Great.
sure there'll be a lot of social media posts coming out about this. Zach, I know you're kind of wrapping up the semester, launching the book, got all your other activities going on, family and otherwise. Good luck with the snake.
Yes, I have a pet snake, everybody.
Yeah, your new pet.
Yeah.
And again, thanks very much. It's great seeing you. If there's
Yeah.
anything I can possibly do, let me know. I appreciate you being on Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization once more. Good luck with the book launch.
Thanks, Ira. Good seeing you.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks for watching Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. Be sure to listen to the podcast and follow us on YouTube.